from the Heights in northern Manhattan, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, culture makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome the Executive Director of West Harlem Arts Alliance, Michael Palma Mir. West Harlem Arts Alliance, WHAA, is an independent 501c3 nonprofit arts service organization whose mission is to professionally resource and nurture the artists and arts organizations based in and serving West Harlem and facilitate and develop collaborations through partnerships with local business, educational, civic, and cultural organizations to support the arts in West Harlem. We're going to talk to Michael about the WHAA's mission and so much more of its programming. But first, let me welcome you, Michael, to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's good to see you. It's been too long.
Yes, Aaron, it has been. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I'm happy to be here.
You betcha. You betcha. Well, it's been a long time since we've chatted in person.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I mean, we see each other at events and stuff like that. But, I miss seeing you and other people like we'd see at events. And, COVID's kind of put a squash on people's habits and getting out and seeing things these days.
Yep.
But I'm so happy that you have emerged from the ashes like a phoenix and creating opportunities to bring people together.
Well, that's what WHA is all about, creating those opportunities, especially in West Harlem. And you're right, we're all coming back from, a challenging time, COVID, where everything was sort of shuttered. And now we're sort of beginning to open up, especially this year. We're looking forward to having a full year of programming, our first full year of programming. Of course, we are barely a year old. We started last May. This coming May we'll have completed a year. But as you know, starting a nonprofit organization, a lot of that time is used in filling out and creating or completing all the formalities of becoming a 501c3.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, we've done all that.
Good.
We've done all that. We are a 501c3. We're, dotting our I's, crossing our T's as far as the organization goes. And now we're really looking forward to our first full year of programming.
Well, congratulations to making it to year one, which is usually it's like a restaurant, opening a restaurant in a way. It's like if you make it to year one, you've done something right because you don't have any institutional knowledge until that point.
No, pretty much.
It's really great that you've done that. So congrats. And so I think it's great because you are starting at the beginning. It's fresh, even though you've had a vast career in fundraising. I've known Michael for years, and he's done a lot of stuff with the Patorio de Español and many different art organizations in northern Manhattan. Could you share a little bit with our listeners your path to creating the West Harlem Arts Alliance?
Well, my path, or rather our path, the community's paths, was really created or guided by the community benefits agreement we have with Columbia University. As you know, Columbia University is building a northern campus in Manhattanville, and they used eminent domain to take private property for a private good, which is not usually how that works. But in order to compensate for that, the community has entered into an agreement with Columbia that provides for certain things to happen. And one of those things was to create an arts organization for West Harlem. And so after 14 years after that agreement was signed, finally, the West Harlem Development Corporation, which is the organization that funnels all those funds, incubated us. And I worked very, very closely with them, with Ziad Ramadan and Joanna Castro. And they basically helped us get started. They sort of sponsored us in the months leading up to last May. And so our trajectory has really been sort of written out in the Community Benefits Agreement, and for a very, very good reason. West Harlem has always been sort of like the stepchild of all the three Harlems, that is East Harlem, Central Harlem, and West Harlem. And it really has been underserved as far as art services and advocating for the arts and supporting the arts and artists that live and work in West Harlem. And so to a large degree, that is why West Harlem Arts Alliance exists.
And just to be clear, for those of you playing along at home that might not be familiar with what defines West Harlem.
Okay, that's a very good question.
Because I think you got to start there, right?
Yeah.
And so am I right? Morningside Heights, Well, you tell me. I'm just saying, like, defining West Harlem, do you mean Morningside Heights, Manhattanville, and Hamilton Heights? Does it go beyond that? Or is it less than that or so?
Well, sometimes it's defined by the community district, and really, it's probably a little bit bigger than that. West Harlem really is a confluence of three very unique and very different neighborhoods: Morningside Heights, Manhattanville, and Hamilton Heights or Sugar Hill. And it's hard to say that's all one area. It's not
Right.
as monolithic as, say, Central Harlem is, or East Harlem is, or even like Washington Heights or Inwood. It really is three neighborhoods, and for some reason they call it West Harlem.
I blame the real estate people.
It probably goes older than that, actually. It goes way back. But I think that gives us a lot of strength because, as the community goes, because I believe we're one of the most diverse communities in all of Manhattan.
Absolutely.
Second, maybe to Washington Heights or maybe even Jackson Heights. And certainly there are many voices there, art voices in the area, and we are now in the business of celebrating and putting forth those voices.
Gotcha. Well, those voices need to be heard, and I love the fact that it is arts oriented and arts focused, and it's great diversity to pull from those three.
Absolutely.
For those who also may know, there was a Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance that also has served Washington Heights, Inwood, and West Harlem over the years. And so, what distinguishes your organization specifically from the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance for art service?
Sure. I'd like to think, actually, there's also Harlem Arts Alliance.
And not that people have to choose between them. I'm just saying that it's great to have all these things.
Yes.
But just curious though.
Yeah.
For those who
there's a Harlem Arts Alliance, and we're the West Harlem Arts Alliance, and then there's a Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance.
will there be an East Arts Alliance? We'll find out.
Yeah, and we're sort of in between, right? And actually, at one point, I believe there was an East Harlem Arts Alliance called AHA. I don't think it exists anymore, but we're more focused in our immediate area. Our mandate really has us focusing in West Harlem, although I believe we have a very close affinity with the Harlem Arts Alliance and with the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance. As a matter of fact, we are now working very closely with NOMA in offering 3 workshops for artists. It's being produced in conjunction with NOMA and the West Harlem Arts Alliance, sponsored by the West Harlem Development Corporation, which are 3 workshops in the areas of grant writing. So we see down the line that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for funding, especially for individual artists, small arts organizations. And what we have noticed and identified is that there's a great need for artists and small arts organizations. The bigger ones, really have the staff to do this.
They have departments.
Yeah, they have departments. But the smaller organizations and the individual artists, when it comes time to fill in the applications or have the sort of head to approach an application, we feel that there's a really great need for that, for having them to work through those issues.
Sure.
And so we're offering 3 workshops, one for individual artists, one for small arts organizations, and one focusing back on the individual artists and in the way they articulate their own vision and artistic statements, whether it be for a grant or for an independent project. So we believe these 3 workshops will really help in the coming months, especially as we enter the grant season. As you know, Aaron, we're entering the grant season from the city, the state, and the federal government, and even locally through the West Harlem Development Corporation, CBG, and even NOMA's own grant programs. There's a real need for artists to sort of get their head around and to learn valuable techniques in working through those issues and working through those applications and really submitting a very strong and competitive applications. These are all very competitive processes for the funds. And so we realize is that in order to put forth very good applications, they have to, be able to learn certain techniques. And thankfully, we identified a person as the instructor, Juanita Lara, who lives up here in Marble Hill and who is the development director for the Bronx Net Television, as a wonderful, amazing instructor who really offering valuable information for individual artists and small arts organizations as they work through these issues in applying for funding, especially the funding that's coming down the pike very soon.
Well, I think it's wonderful to have these technical workshops, we call them, and is that kind of like be like one of the major tent poles of your programming move forward?
That's one of them.
Yeah.
And by the way, our collaboration with NOMA on these workshops is enhanced because now we're not offering these technical workshops, but we're offering them in conjunction with a mixer. So, for example, our last workshop was at the Rio Gallery 3.
Yep.
And then afterwards, the mixer was at Sion Cafe. And what that does, we believe, is that the conversation doesn't stop at the end of the workshop. It continues on into the mixer. And they get an opportunity to speak with folks like myself, with Nidia, who is the executive director of NOMA, as well as Juanita, to go over, and discuss more of the topics that were discussed at the workshops and delve into each person's individual situation. And as a way to sort of continue the conversation and network a little bit, we find that is very useful, especially for our community. And so each one of the 3 workshops are going to offer an opportunity to mix and mingle a little bit.
That's really great because, as we know, the conversations keep continuing, and everyone has very specific needs inside of the greater needs.
Sure. And if I can make a little shameless plug here,
Please.
Our next workshop will be April 24th at the Hispanic Society.
Great.
And the mixer will be in the patio, in the terrace there of the Hispanic Society.
Great place to be.
Yes, absolutely. And if it's raining, it's going to be in the Soroya Room, which is an amazing place. No one has ever been there, it's one of West Harlem's best kept secret. And we like to claim the Hispanic Society as West Harlem because it's on the downhill slope of Sugar Hill. So we claim that as ours.
I think you can, and I will stand in your corner. That sounds great to me. Love it. And Hispanic Society, by the way, has been on our podcast and has a wonderful array of collection that everyone should, for free, check out. People don't remember it. It's
absolutely,
free,
absolutely.
What's wonderful, those are great opportunities for this programming, and it keeps the scene, by encouraging people to create, keeps West Harlem and the local artists and the small arts orgs very motivated and vibrant to keep creating work.
Now, getting back to your original question, that's one of the things we do,
right.
These technical assistance workshops. But I believe if you want to extend the metaphor, the tent poles of our programming, we will soon be handling or managing and working very closely with the West Harlem Development Corporation, who offers funding to West Harlem through the CB, Community Benefits Agreement, to handle the funding that is allocated for the arts. Right now they're doing it, and they do a wonderful job, and I think the program manager for WHDC is Joanna Castro. We all know Joanna Castro.
Joanna is wonderful. Shout out to Joanna.
They do great work, and Ziad Ramadan, as the head of the WHDC, have really honed down and sharpened funding for West Harlem in a way that is becoming very, very impactful. But they realize that they're not necessarily expert in the arts, and so WHAA, and I'm going to be working very closely with them and Joanna to distribute the funding in West Harlem. So that's going to be one of our big tent poles.
That's great.
Of programming.
Starting next year?
Starting this year, actually. We'll be working together, and then in the following years, we'll probably be taking up the whole process.
Great.
But we are expanding the opportunities to provide more accessibility to receive fundings, not only for arts organizations, but also to the individual artist. This is something that's going to be new for West Harlem and the CBG, and we're hoping that it'll provide more funding to individual artists or access to funding so that they can do projects within West Harlem, which is a little different than what NOMA does and what the Harlem Arts Alliance does as a way to
Correct, because it'll be West Harlem specific. It won't be beyond
West
that.
Harlem specific. It could involve artists from Northern Manhattan and Central Harlem and East Harlem or any part of New York, so long as the programming happens in West Harlem and that it provides accessibility for all to come and see the events. In other words, and not only perhaps in English, but in other languages, especially if the marketing promotion is done in both languages or in 3 languages or 4 languages that you can find up here in West Harlem.
That's awesome. Well, we look forward to that programming. And again, more opportunities for artists, and obviously directly links to the technical workshops. And so go to the techno workshop,
Sure.
learn how to write a grant, write the grant next year.
And get the
folks.
money.
And get the money.
The other polls, which are not as big, but certainly there, we've just completed our website.
Great.
And if I can do another shameless plug.
Yes, what is the website address?
www.whaanyc.org. And again, it's our very first website, so it's not going to be the end all and be all.
You can only do one at a time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And on the website, we have a couple of interesting features. Not only do we have a page where you can actually sign up for the workshops and you can peruse the website, we also offer a couple of interesting features. One is an event calendar where it's user-driven. In other words, if you, Aaron, have, or Inwood Art Works has something they want to promote, you can go to our website and list your events on our website. The only thing that we do is approve it to make sure it's an appropriate event. But otherwise, you put down all the information.
Self-populated calendar.
Self-populated calendar. And the other interesting aspect to our website is something we call the A-list, which we would like to call the artist list, which is the creation. And this is something that has always been the bane of West Harlem's existence. Community Board 9 has tried to do it. Many other organizations have tried to do it. And I think hopefully we'll be the first to successfully do it, is create an artist directory. Where if, Aaron, I need a videographer. How do I find a videographer? But go to the A list, and then there'll be a listing of all videographers in and around West Harlem. If I need a photographer, if I need a web designer, if I need someone to the culinary arts, you'll be able to find it on the A list.
It's a great resource.
And we're hoping it will be, yes.
That sounds awesome. That's really great. Well, I think it always sounds wonderful, and it's a lot to do coming up. So you got your hands full.
Yeah,
well, being a longtime resident yourself, you kind of mentioned there's some major players that make up the art scene now in West Harlem, and it's great that you're going to be that are already there. So it looks like this is for, correct me if I'm wrong, for the up and comers. For a lot more focused on, not that you don't have partnerships with everybody, but just like your programming is focused on cultivating this next generation of artists and small arts orgs.
Absolutely, and I always like to say, West Harlem is where art lives. In other words, a lot of people perform and work downtown in Central Harlem, up here, in all parts of New York, and even all parts of the country. But West Harlem is really known to be an area where a lot of artists actually live. Yeah. And so very rarely do they get an opportunity to practice their art or to show their art within the community they live in. Yeah. And certainly this is a direction that WHAA is heading towards, is to celebrate the artists and the voices within West Harlem. Not only arts organizations, but individual artists and the arts in general. Well,
no doubt. I'm just going to give you a question that's happening up in Inwood and Washington Heights, and no doubt it's affecting West Harlem as well, because Washington Heights is an affirmation. The fact that you're able to do this Arts Alliance is a great affirmation for demand in the neighborhood. That's great. How are you guys addressing? We were talking about earlier. There's the affordable housing issue affecting everybody in Manhattan. It's not just West Harlem or Inwood or Washington Heights. We were the cheap neighborhoods, and now we are no longer the cheap neighborhoods, because guess what? Those really don't exist anymore. Cheaper, I guess cheaper in comparison to, say, Gramercy. But the issue is, like, I find it hard as, I'm speaking for myself, and I think we have a lot in common in the sense of, like, how do we keep artists in our neighborhood, the retention of artists in the neighborhood to, and I think, by offering grants, I think is one way, but I'm just curious what your take is, because you're starting this fresh out, and you have, you're going for the people to live there, but obviously we got to retain people living there.
Sure,
and make it a home for artists. So what's your take on it right now in West Harlem, making it, quote unquote, affordable to stay and create art?
The affordability issue extends beyond just individual artists. It's really for thriving working class. And West Harlem has always been, like I mentioned before, the home of where artists really live. And if they performed in Central Harlem, they lived in
Right.
West Harlem. And for many reasons, West Harlem has, I mean, it's not only affordable, but the apartments are not tenement apartment styles. You know, they're very huge apartments, they're huge buildings. And they can accommodate family. And so, or a family. They're very large apartments, very large units, and that's why that's why it's all very popular. I think that and that housing stock is shrinking. There's a lot of pressure, from developers, from just sheer community development, and certainly from Columbia University.
Exactly.
That is putting a lot of pressure on the affordable housing stock in not only West Harlem but in Central Harlem. I would imagine up here too, in Inwood and Washington Heights. I kind of am of the mind, very much like our borough president, who was my council member when he was a council member, is that if you want to have affordable housing, New York City has to build it. And I believe, our borough president is Mark Levine, and I believe Mark is on the right track. And I believe that his vision for housing is a vision I think the city should adopt, in that it should really try to once again get into the business of building affordable housing in order to preserve our communities, to especially preserve the character of our community,
And keep people here.
and keep artists here.
Because
keep the
otherwise they're
working
going to
class here.
go, which is the outer boroughs are great, but people are going to live in Pennsylvania. They're going to live in Connecticut and upstate New York and New Jersey, of course. So it's they're willing to put up with the commutes rather than, the hassle of paying for what they can't afford.
Sure. Preserve what's here, which is great, but build new affordable housing.
Yeah, because I think that's the biggest elephant in the room for attracting young artists and new artists and retaining old artists.
Sure.
Old as in experienced, I mean. And that's hopefully we can all do that because, and I think having an art service organization like yours can help find ways of, making West Harlem an even more valuable place to live.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Too, I think that there's a great timeline on your website. I went on your website. You have a great timeline of what's happening, has happened. I invite people to check it out. And also, since you're just beginning, I want to ask you, in finishing your first year, in your next few years, where do you hope, and looking back from those few years to now, where do you hope West Harlem Arts Alliance is on that timeline? Your contributions.
Well, I really, really would like to see a very vibrant community of artists and arts organization, and for West Harlem to be a sort of focal point for the arts, one of the focal points for the arts in all of northern Manhattan. I mean, Central Harlem has the venues right now. I mean, Central Harlem is a really hopping, jumping place. And to a large degree, so is Washington Heights. And Inwood's to a great
We're trying.
thanks to you, and to the Inwood Art Works and to NOMA. West Harlem, we're playing catch up a little bit, and I think that in 3 years' time we're going to be sort of one of the premier places, not only for the arts but also as a resource for the arts. There's a lot of recently a lot of downtown art galleries and are beginning to explore the uptown art scene, and beginning to realize and recognize the fact that we have a lot of interesting artists up here, and they're producing some really wonderful work. I mean, all you have to do is go to, say, for example, the recent Woman in the Heights shows by the North Manhattan Arts Alliance. I don't know if you had an opportunity to go and see the show. Just a tremendous show with amazing artists. And I believe this year, NOMA, working a little bit with us, has featured many West Harlem artists in that show. And if you take a look, it's all very incredible. And I think it's garnering a lot of attention, especially from, the sort of galleries downtown.
Well, as they should, because you know why? We have a wonderful community of artists up here, and there's no doubt, as you kind of said earlier, forever we've been a bedroom community for artists that lived up here and then went to work downtown or out of town. Exactly. And so it's time, and it's just one of the reasons, if not the reason, I started Inwood Art Works is to celebrate local artists, and thereby celebrating locally, you get to champion the local arts going community as well as the artists themselves. And I think what better thing is that is to live and work in your own neighborhood, huh? How great is that?
That is fantastic. I mean, I have to say, and I've only been able to do this in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, because really before, if you really wanted to do anything cultural, you really had to get on the subway or the bus and head downtown.
Right.
And now I find myself almost every weekend going to Harlem Stage, going to Harlem School of the Arts, going to Riverside Church Theater, going to the many venues in and around West Harlem, and walking to a restaurant, walking to the bar to have a pre-show drink, going to the show, after the show, going to a club within West Harlem. So it's pretty amazing. This is something that we, as an advocate not only for the arts but for the community, because I was born and raised in West Harlem, something that we've been championing for many, many years to happen in West Harlem. Or, when my father grew up in West Harlem, it had all those things, and somehow during the 50s and 60s we lost it all. We lost the venues, we lost the sense of culture, the sense of art activities or sort of entertainment in the area. There were no really theaters left anymore, movie theaters. And so now that's slowly but surely coming back. And I'm glad I'm working with the West Harlem Arts Alliance to help bring that back, especially to West Harlem.
Well, Michael, you hit one of my mantras too. Why go downtown? It's all uptown.
Yes.
Why go downtown? But don't worry, downtown. We'll still come downtown to visit. No problem with that. Well, Michael, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come visit with us today on this Inwood Art Works on airs. And anything else you'd like to tell anybody else?
Well, no, just check out our website to see what we're doing, especially to get the latest of what's happening, especially with grant opportunities. Right now, we're coming up with the guidelines for this year's cycle of grants. And so just check our website, www.whaanyc. Can you believe someone has WAAA.org? WHAANYC.org. And just peruse our website and get information, see what's happening in the area, see what opportunities there are for artists, and partake.
You have your marching instructions, folks. Thank you, Michael, for coming.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much.
You betcha. You betcha. Once again, Michael Palma Mir here on Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the artists, musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, cultural makers, and many people who make Northern Manhattan a wonderful place to be. If you have a moment, please show some love right now and rate and review this podcast. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. Also, many thanks to Hudson View Gardens here for hosting us here, and for HeightsIce.com for their uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation at InwoodArtWorks.nyc/donate or via Venmo at Inwood Art Works. Be sure to follow us on social media to keep up with all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, FilmWorks Al Fresco, pop galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, and Inwood Art Works programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.